Are you sick and tired of feeling stuck? I know it's not a fun place to be because I've been there. And the good news is, you don't have to stay there. There is a way out, and I'm going to give it to you right now. You can get back in the driver's seat of your life, stop self sabotage, and discover the clarity you need to move forward with ease. Does that sound like something you need? If it does, I want you to run. Don't walk, but virtually run over to KarenFreeland.com/6-secrets. That's /6-secrets today and get my 6 secrets to get unstuck. It's totally free and it will get you one step closer to living a life you love. Welcome to Rock Your Reinvention, the show for high-achieving career women who refuse to settle for mediocrity and aren't afraid to take bold action. This is a place where you can authentically show up, where every dream and goal can be validated and achieved. Hi, I'm your host, Karen Freeland, a certified life reinvention coach, speaker, and award-winning author. I'm here to give you the tips, tools, and strategies to help you shift your mindset, build your confidence, and take meaningful actions so you can rock your reinvention. Ready to go from stuck to thriving? Let's go. Kamber, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here. Love the energy already. So excited to jump in.
Awesome. So, Kamber, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your business. I'm so excited to learn more.
So we have a company called the YoPro Know. I started it back in 2018. It was actually a blog, and there's a whole big story behind there that we can dive into later. But it's a blog turned consulting firm. So we help companies attract, develop, and retain top young professional talent. We do that through strategy that we have determined and really uncovered based on data that we've collected over the years on what young professionals want and need to be successful in the workplace. And the workplace is changing. We have significant workforce crisis on our hands. And so my job is much broader than, just serving our clients. It's serving the entire workforce. So we believe by, working with one client at a time, we will be able to help the broader workforce development efforts.
Oh my gosh, we need that so much. All right, just tell us though, are you single, married? Just give us a little background.
Yeah, so I'm actually about to get married in the next couple of weeks. And so I think by the time the episode airs, I will be a married woman. So I currently have a fiance. His name is Clay, and we are really excited. So yeah, about to shift into married life.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. And I love meeting with younger women because I think there's so much energy and excitement, and you just have such a fresh perspective and outlook on the world than some of us who have been around the block a little bit longer and maybe we're a little jaded. I won't point any fingers to anyone listening. Maybe that resonates with you. But I love this. And just before we kind of get into some of the questions that I was thinking about, you said something really interesting, which is we have a crisis on our hands. Can you just expand a little bit about what you see as the crisis so that we're all kind of looking at it from the same lens?
Yeah, it's a great question. We know that there's going to be a very large amount of young professionals that are making up the workforce by 2025. So it's right now, Gallup says it's about I guess it'll be about a half or more than half of young professionals will make up the US workforce by 2025. Experienced professionals are exiting the workforce at a rapid rate. They're taking, and keep in mind, baby boomers, they're called baby boomers for a reason. There is a lot more of them than there are people in other generations. And so while they're exiting the workforce, they're taking that wisdom, that experience with them. And we know that young professionals are job hopping much more than previous generations. So what we're seeing is they are not getting the skills that they need to be the next leaders for the workforce that we need in 15 to 20 years. That is a really big problem. Now we've got AI that's coming in very quickly, I might add, right? Even this time next year, who knows what it's going to look like. That's going to certainly help the situation. And a lot of people might disagree with that, but it will help the situation because we're just going to have a workforce shortage. But we need young professionals to become leaders. And we're really starting to see that drop a little bit. So that's really what I was talking about. Does that help?
Oh, 1000%. Yeah. I just wanted to, and I'm seeing this in my practice, right? because I've got all the Gen X women coming to me and they're like, get me out of here. I don't want to do this
Mhm.
anymore. This is not
Mhm.
fulfilling me. There is a lot of chaos and stress. The
Yep.
younger generation isn't maybe able to pick up some of the slack
Mhm.
because they don't have these skills that you referenced. So they're feeling
Mhm.
like the pressure to do a lot more of the work. And the baby boomers are leaving. So it's all falling to this Gen X
Mhm.
generation. And there's just a lot of turmoil, I think, there.
Absolutely. And just to also get everybody on the same page, when I talk about young professionals, I'm talking about Gen Z who are in the workforce. There's still a lot that are in high school that are not into the workforce yet. But talking about Gen Z, millennials, and then our experienced professionals are 40 plus. That's our Gen Xers, our baby boomers. So just wanted to put that in perspective as well.
Yeah, that's helpful to have that delineation between the ages and when you're speaking about that. So let's go back first with your story. So you were working in corporate
Mhm.
and you had this inspiration to start your own business, apparently from a blog. So can you kind of just like walk us through what inspired you to go on this trajectory?
Yeah, and I love talking about this because now, every year as I get farther away from that, I learned something about that time in my life. But I was a Furman grad, graduated, immediately moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I worked for a large Fortune 250 insurance company, what everybody dreams of, right? And I quickly realized it was really not the right fit for me. I was 21, fresh out of college, very naive, and I really thought that I would come in and climb the corporate ladder. Now that I'm, 7, 8 years past that point, I recognize what caused me to leave the company within a year. And it was really
Mm,
communication and expectations. No surprise, because that's what we see from the data all the time from the young professionals we interview and survey. So what I experienced in that first year, I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was a miserable first year out of college. And I was a very prideful person, still am, and did not really want to share what I was going through with others. And so I decided to turn it into a blog naturally. I think at the time it really was such a creative outlet for me. And so I ended up starting to interview just one person. And I asked him, what are you struggling with as a young professional? What are you looking for in the future? And at the end of that interview, he said, well, what are you going to do with this? Like, what's your goal? He was kind of like the guinea pig, but he was like, what's your goal? And I was like, do you know somebody else that I could interview? And so that was how it started. So that was 2018, early 2018. Started interviewing young professionals. One person connected me to the next. And after 2 years, I had, a couple hundred interviews, and I realized we can take this farther. And so I was recognizing there were a lot of consistent themes and overlapping messages that these, almost close to 1,000 young professionals at the time were sharing. And I knew that there could be a place for this. And so that was what started this journey. 2020 was when I really said, I'm spending a lot of time on this. I really love this. How can I turn this into a monetization? How can I create this and turn it into a business that I can one day take full time? And so from 2020 until now, end of 23, it has been a really wild journey, but it was because of those initial years as a young professional where I realized that I was not alone. Other people were out there that could kind of speak to this concept. And turns out it's a pain point that most experienced professionals who are leaders recognize and they see as a problem themselves. And so I found that there was this gap. It just took me a really kind of crazy path to find it.
yeah, and I think that's so cool because, we love reinventions here on Rack Your Reinvention, obviously. But I think so many people think the reinvention has to happen overnight. Like, you're at point A and you want to get to Z, but that rarely happens. It's like, I think I'm going to explore point D and just see where that takes me. And oh, you know what? I didn't
Right.
actually like that, but that brought me to E. And well, E is pretty interesting, but you know what I really want to do? It's G, whatever. And we just move through
Hmm.
this path so organically. And that's exactly what happened to you. I'm just going to start a blog and this is interesting and this is
Right.
a creative outlet for me. I mean, even with my first book, I didn't know I was ever going to actually publish it. I just wanted to see if I could write a book and it was
Mhm.
fun and interesting and creative. So don't put too much pressure on yourselves, those of you that are listening, to get from A to Z overnight because that's not actually the journey for anyone.
No. It's definitely not. And I think that sometimes people early on, they thought that I had a much more strategic outlook. And I'm here to say that I definitely did it at the beginning. And of course now, where I've been doing this full time for about a year and a half. So it's real now. Like there is strategy in place, there's vision, but I still oftentimes will have that little bit. And this could be because I'm young and I'm 28 years old, and that is still young in the grand scheme of things. But I have enough experience now to know that it's okay to try something and have it not work out. So I'm still doing that often. So even though I have my plan for 2024, if something comes up and I hear it's a pain point enough times for my clients or for my audiences when I speak, then I know that it's worth us exploring. And so in those instances, I don't have a vision. I go for it. And maybe that's why I've gotten where I've gotten today.
For sure. And just a quick question. Did you happen to invest in a business coach or anything as you were figuring out your strategy and your plan? Or did you surround yourself with people who had kind of been there, done that? How did you get the information you needed to really build a solid business?
I asked a lot of questions. I thankfully got paired up. The Greenville Chamber locally has been a really, really strong supporter of mine. They have really great programs for young professionals, including a mentoring program. And so I got paired up with two mentors, one of whom is still my mentor today. I call him up occasionally, and he's really been an integral part for me. I now have a more formal mentorship program through the Next Innovation Center. So they're located here in Greenville. Also, they exist to help kind of fuel the entrepreneur ecosystem. And so I've got a lot of formal and informal mentors just outside of those people alone. So I'm very lucky. I think I was very persistent early on, where I would reach
Hmm.
out to like very senior leaders in the community, thanks to these mentors who opened the door and made introductions. So I was meeting with CEOs, early in my 20s, and they probably laughed at me at first when I reached out, but once I got there, they were like, "Oh, you just want to learn like how I got to where I am." And so I've asked a lot of questions. I've spent a lot of time listening, and that is how I got here. So to answer your question, did I have a business coach? I didn't have one until last year in 2022, which was the year that I took the business full time. So I don't think that my journey is right for everybody. I think that
Mm.
everybody's journey is their own. But I had a really great base because, again, I was interviewing people since 2018. So I had this really big base already going into this business full time when I took it full time. And so the audience can tell you the pain points, right? That's how you start testing the market. And so that was something unusual. Like a lot of people have an idea and then they start. I had this really, really big content database and a lot of young professionals and senior leaders in my network from the years of doing this. And so I did things a little bit backwards, but it's worked for me. Wouldn't necessarily work for everybody. But one thing I'll mention about coaches that I have found, I tried one last year. It was not the right fit. And so
Mm.
I think it's important to mention that not every coach is the right fit. I think specificity is helpful. So like when a coach specializes in something, that's really great. So like right now I meet quarterly with a communication coach who helps with our team and our team's growth. That's what we need right now because we have a team of
Sure.
8, including me. And so like that's what we need right now. But next year we're going to need something different. And so I think it's just important when you're thinking of coaches, like what do you need right now in this stage of life that you're in the stage of your business? And that's really important.
Oh, yeah. And that'll change. One coach that works really well for the first, beginning of your business isn't necessarily going to be the one that takes you to scale 7 figures and that kind
Right.
of thing. So, yeah, don't be afraid to change that around as you're going through the seasons of your life. So let's look a little bit at the research that you do. I find this so fascinating. And there's a lot of people who listen to this show who manage people and large teams. So is there any difference that you're seeing in your research between young female talent and young male talent? And if so, what are some of those differences?
So while we have not put on any research specifically about male and female young professionals, that's something that's definitely in our future. And even more so, we're going to be dissecting the young professionals as a whole because right now there's, 21 to 39 is the definition. That's a really wide range. So we're going to look at gender, we're going to look at industry, and we're going to look at age in particular. And, when you're a young professional in your 20s versus when you're in your 30s, it looks really different because you might be in a different stage of life. And so we're going to be moving in that direction, particularly in the next couple of years. But based on, all the interviews I've done and the research we've done, I definitely have some takeaways. And as I was preparing for this today, some of the things I think are really interesting is when we look at, the top 5 factors that drive and motivate young professionals to staying or leaving a company. Because really, if you do one really well, they're going to stay. If you do one really poor, that's going to encourage them to leave. Out of those 5, there are some differences where you see more women versus men. Women really look at diversity and inclusion. Naturally, if you're a leader and your company doesn't have a ton of people that look like women, younger women,
Right.
that could be an opportunity for you to make a change, because the reality is if they see that there's no one like them in the C-suite, that is going to encourage them and might demotivate them, right, from staying at your company for a long term. So diversity and inclusion, education is really critical. So that's one of our motivating factors is, how long is your onboarding period? How long are you setting your young professionals up for success? Our research says that young professionals need an average of 3 months to feel really confident, but a lot of companies don't do that because it's, they want to hire them and they want to get them in the job, right? They're
Yeah.
not here to babysit, but unfortunately there is a direct correlation to poor retention and high turnover when young professionals don't feel like they're set up for success. So women who are definitely less risk averse, right? Or more risk averse, excuse me. They are more likely to be the ones that will leave if they feel like they're not given the tools to be successful. So we found that with
Mm.
women. With men, we've actually, despite interest in people, we found that meaningful work is really important to all young professionals. It's actually the second qualifying motivating factor for young professionals in general. They want to work in a meaningful role. They want to make an impact. Some of the men that we've interviewed and surveyed have actually said that more, which I find interesting. I think you could probably unpack that a lot. Women probably feel, especially if you're a young professional woman and you have a family, or maybe you are married or whatever, you're invested in something outside of work, you might already have
Mm.
that impact. That's kind of what I found. And again, that's not anything super concrete, just from what we've seen. And then growth is another really key factor. So growth is something that if you don't have growth opportunities at work, you will lose talent. It kind of goes back to the diversity piece. If you don't have
Yes.
opportunities that are very clear for a female to climb up the ladder or do whatever, that's going to negatively impact you in the eyes of a young professional. So that's just some high level data. I'm happy to dive into that a little bit more, but that's what we found when it comes to gender specific research.
Oh, I think that's so helpful. And I'm seeing this with the younger professionals that I do coach, right? I mean, I have a couple of them in their mid 20s and they say this all the time. There's no room for growth. There's no one like me. I'm not being trained. They're just throwing me in a role every time there's a reorg and I get jostled around and I'm expected to know how to perform. And I mean, it's
Mhm.
just, yeah, definitely what I'm seeing too. All right. One of the things that I'm super curious about with your experience is why does everyone seem to hate on millennials? I don't hate millennials. I have my own thoughts on why I think some people are a little bitter with them. And I'm just
Mhm.
curious what you've kind of seen in your professional research.
So at the moment, people are definitely hating on millennials. They're also more and more hating on Gen Z, right? Because those are the new kids on the block. Gen Z in the workforce, if you're going based on that 21 to 39 range, Gen Z is about 21 to 27 right now. So
Hmm.
they're the new kids on the block. Millennials have been the new kids on the block. And I think a great way to answer this question is one time, really in the last year, I was having a conversation with somebody and they had pulled out this article and it was from that day, like March, back when baby boomers were young professionals themselves, right? When they were in their early 20s and their early 30s. And it had some headline, and I can't remember the exact name of it right now, but it was the Times. And it said something along the lines of like, baby boomers, question mark, like good or bad for the workforce, like something along those lines.
Right.
And it just shows that like every new generation to the workplace has always been the focus. So this is nothing new. What we try to do is, all right, let's talk about maybe the problems between these multi-generations in the workplace. Are we communicating the best that we can? No, because young professionals are telling us that communication is the number one reason they leave. So this is a solvable problem. Like, we can fix this problem.
Mhm.
Communication has always been a problem. Like, that was probably the crux of that when the baby boomers were they're 20 years old and they were young professionals. So there's always something about the next generation. So I think that's answer one. Answer two is technology. Technology has transformed our workplace. It is really putting a stamp on the modern workforce that is just inherently different than when baby boomers were young professionals. And so the advancement of technology, the way that current young professionals were raised, again, with technology, with so much noise, with parents that were helicopter parents or parents that gave us participation trophies, like, we
Mhm.
we have been raised a certain way, and that's why we're now viewed by, ironically, the parents that gave us the participation trophies. They're now calling millennials and Gen Zers, people with poor work ethic. They're unmotivated. They are entitled. Well, if you look back and you really peel back the layers, you can really start to see why these generations act the way that they do. So that's my 2 cents. I think that you're always going to critique the new kids in the workforce, and two, technology and advancements have really changed the modern workforce. And so millennials are the easy people to target.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so interesting. And thank you. That's a much more educated guess than mine. Well, not guess, but, based in data and what you're seeing. For me,
Yeah.
I think it's jealousy, straight up 100% jealousy. Because let's just look
Uh-huh.
at the other foot, right? Like the shoe on the other foot. You've got the Gen Xers over here, and I'm right on the cusp. So depending on my day, right, I could be more
Mhm.
millennial, I could be more Gen Z or Gen X, but
Right.
I mean, this is a recovered workaholic right here who would have gone to
Hmm.
work with like her arm cut off and been like, "It's fine, everything's fine. I can type with one hand. It'll
Right.
regenerate. Don't worry."
Yeah.
So I definitely think that these Gen Xers who have given all this blood, sweat, and tears and
Mhm.
stayed in jobs that they hated because they're trying to pay their dues and work their way up, all of a sudden have someone younger come in and go, "Yeah, no, I'll be in at 9. Oh, yeah, no, I have a thing
Mhm.
tonight. I'm not going to stay and work late."
Mhm.
And we're all sitting here going,
Right.
"I want that too. Why am I killing myself?"
Right.
But we can't just be
Mhm.
honest with how we're feeling, because then we would sort of be
Mhm.
admitting that, the way we've always lived our life and looked at work is wrong. And that's a really
Mhm.
scary thing to do. But my gosh,
Mhm.
will it set you free? And I just started to look at all these millennials around me when I was in corporate. And I'm like, can I do this? Can I do what they do?
Yeah.
And I started doing it. I mean, there was one year my kids had baseball. I left at 4:30 like every Tuesday and Thursday, and I just
Mhm.
walked right out of the office. I didn't apologize. I didn't ask for permission.
Mhm.
I had my phone. If
Mhm.
somebody pinged me, I responded, but I was like, I'm going to be there in that front row of the bleacher for my kids.
Mhm.
And if anybody has a thing to say about it, well, then we'll chat. And you know what?
Right.
No one ever said a word. That was so freeing. So that's why I think everybody's
Mhm.
pissed off at millennials, because they're living the corporate life everybody else wishes they could live.
Right. And that's a really interesting perspective. I think that jealousy, you could certainly tag the problem with that, but it's hard. You're going to be hard pressed to find somebody who's going to admit that. And so in
Yeah.
our work, right, like the conversations we've had, that's really never come across because no one's going to admit that, right? Like, that's not something that people want to share. But I think that could absolutely be a piece of it. And I think we'll know more in the future. And you can always kind of look at how, like, we'll see how millennials act when Gen Alpha comes on the scene. So there's a
Right.
lot of ways that you
Right.
can kind of, like, we'll have to circle back on that. But that's going to be also really interesting when Gen Alpha comes to the workforce, which will be a little bit of time, but something to keep in mind as well.
Oh, for sure. All right. So let's flip back to your situation with you starting your own business. Did you have any fears when you were starting out? And if so, how did you handle those?
Yeah, I definitely think there were a lot of fears. I think it's hard not to, but I will say again, I was very lucky that I had this space with me. And I haven't mentioned this, but I did work obviously while this was my side hustle for several years. So I left the insurance company and then I worked for a nonprofit for 4.5 years. In that time was when I spent a lot of hours offline, early mornings, late evenings, weekends, which was also during COVID. So there's a lot of time for me to do that. But when I realized that I really was ready to take this full time, I don't know if it was as much fear as it was just, am I doing the right thing? It was a lot of like introspection, a lot of what if I do fail? And so I guess there was a little bit of fear in there, but I felt so passionate about what I was doing. I was getting results. I was working with clients already and had a little money in the bank. I made a plan in January of 2022 where I said, okay, in 6 months, if this is what I want to do, how much money do I need to live? How do I what if I do this and then 6 months passes and I have no new clients? But even though I already had clients, I was like, I wanted to make sure I had this plan. And so I did come up with a plan where I knew I would at least have 6 months of living expenses
Yep.
should no client ever sign on again. And so I was lucky that I had a little bit of a base from the years of doing this just part time and kind of as a side hustle. So I was fortunate to have that. I think that's maybe what kind of curbed my fear a little bit. But I think if you look back on it, I was probably way more scared than I thought so, but it was just because I was so passionate about what I was doing. I had my eyes on the prize. And once I made that mindset shift, I was like, there's no going back for me at this point. So it's either I'm doing this and failing, or I'm doing this and
Mhm.
succeeding.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to give it a shot, right? You just are so excited about it and so passionate about it. And it's so worth it. I love that you asked yourself, what if I fail? Yeah, what if you do fail? Let's look at that and unpack it. And you
Yeah.
realize that, okay, if I have no clients ever sign on again, I love that part, ever sign on again because you've
Yeah.
already had clients, then okay, I have 6 months of living, but what the heck are the chances of no client ever signing on with you again? Probably zero. Okay.
Right.
Maybe statistics would disagree with me, but I mean, you know how to get clients. You know what to do. You're going to put in the work because you're that passionate about it. And I think so many women sit there in the fear and the what ifs and all the bad things that could happen instead of looking at the probability of those bad things and going, well, what could I do to ensure that that doesn't happen? What's my
Mhm.
contingency plan?
Right. And it's a really hard thing. It's easier said than done. I know that for sure. But I think for me, knowing that I had a little bit of a plan if
Mhm.
something should go wrong, right? Like I will be able to provide for myself. I'll be able to have a roof over my head and eat dinner every night. That was a little bit of a fear for me, but I also know that I feel very privileged in that I was able to have clients coming in. And so again, probably was more scared than I even remember. But now I have like new sets of fear, right? There's new
Sure.
fears as the business grows, as I've got to make sure that we pay 8 people every month. Like there's new fears. So like it doesn't matter when you do it. I think that kind of reminds me of a piece of advice that somebody shared with me last year when I first started doing this full time. I was very lonely at the beginning. It was like
Mm,
crippling
yeah.
loneliness. It does not feel that way anymore, but it did when I first started this full time. And it was a good friend of mine who has had her business for 3 years. So she is a business owner. And she was like, these feelings never really go away. It's just that how you react to it changes and the like intensity of it changes because when you build a business, you just have a mistake. And so I think that has helped me a lot with my fears because related to the business, because at the end of the day, I know that they're always going to be present. It's
Yeah.
just that they're going to change, and how I adapt to them and react to them is really what makes the difference.
Oh, yeah, because fears are normal. These thoughts are normal. And you're right. As you grow the business and scale, and what happens when you have, 50 people on your team someday, right? Like, who knows? Like, that's going to be a whole different level of fear. But it is
Yeah.
so much about how we react to our thoughts. And that's empowering because we have control over that.
Yeah, absolutely. And some days I definitely forget that. And that's another part of just I think you lose sight of that sometimes, just when things get crazy. And catching me on a good day, but sometimes I do fall back into that. So that's been a really big challenge for me, and is something that I'm just constantly working through.
Yeah, well, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that because A lot of people want to just put on a brave face and front and pretend like everything is always hunky dory. And it's not. We have real challenges and real moments where we question our abilities. And so when other women go through that and everyone is pretending like everything is great and they never have those moments, they feel broken, like something's wrong with them. So the more we can normalize this, preach it. I'm all about it. So maybe let us know. I know for your business, you did mention some other research where you're going to be dissecting it a little more based on gender or age and breaking that up a little bit. But what else should we expect to see coming out of YoPro Know?
Yeah, it's a great question. So 2024 is a big year. We've spent the last couple of months prepping and getting ready for that. And you're definitely going to see me traveling a lot for trainings and workshops across the country with leaders and multi-generational workforces. So we train companies on how to enhance their intergenerational communication. So how do we get different generations to communicate better, to prepare the young professionals to lead in the future, kind of going back to what we shared earlier. So speaking is a really big piece of it. Reports. We put out our first official report this past year on the current state of young professionals today. Yeah, it was super exciting. Next year, we're going to be putting out 4. So we are really kind of gearing up. Our goal is to interview and serve 10,000 young professionals and future young professionals. So we've got some really tangible numbers to put there. We are, gearing up to have one of our biggest consulting years ever. So we've got a lot of really great clients that are starting to work with us next year. And then really behind the scenes, we are constantly figuring out how do we play a part in the workforce development efforts on a broader scale. How can we automate some of what we're doing and eventually kind of prep us so that we can reach more people? So that's definitely what's going to be taking up a lot of our time in 2024. And I definitely anticipate 1 or 2 new team members along the way. So we're really, really looking forward to a great year. And we have learned a lot this year. This time last year, it was just me and 1 contractor. Now there's 7 other people, and we did not have any historical data going into 2023. So now we've got a full year behind us so that we can really gear up for the coming years. And I'm just thrilled about that.
I'm so excited for you. I see very big things coming
Thank
for you
you.
and your business and the companies
really
that you
appreciate
are
that.
supporting. Of course. I think it's going to be really changing. Like you said, if you can change one company at a time, one team at a time, you are going to make a huge impact on the workforce.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Of course. Okay, so we'll let you get kind of the last word here. But what's the one thing you would say to women listening who know they want to change, but they don't know how to get started?
Man, I was thinking about this one, and it's such a hard question because, like I said before, I really believe that everybody's path is so different. And so if people who are listening are like, well, I don't know if I feel comfortable doing some of the things that she talked about, like, don't feel pressured to do it. Like your path is going to be different. I would say that maybe to all of the people listening, one of the things that really helped me was ask a lot of those questions, like I mentioned. So just be really inquisitive, be a learner, listen more than you talk. You'll be really surprised at what you hear and who like you find out down the road, like is talking about you to other people in a positive way. That's something I really love. I think at first I was a little uncomfortable by it. But like the past couple of years, I hear all the time, somebody was talking about like, you want to be the person that people are talking about when you're not in the room, of course, in a positive light.
Yeah.
So how do you get there? How do you get there? And I think, again, it's different for everybody. But for me, it was asking a lot of questions. It was having a lot of meetings so that now I can be a little more strategic with my time. But if you have that capacity, just start by asking questions. And I think that will really carry you. And I don't know if I'm like the prime example to be like, I didn't really have a strong strategy. I just knew that what I was doing mattered. And I leaped and it has worked out in my favor. But I think because of the leap, because of all of those people that I had and my mentors, all of those supporters, that was what helped me so that, again, God forbid if I fell, which I definitely have fallen like many times, like I would categorize them differently, but it's because of all those other people that really kind of like helped me catch me, to stick with the analogy.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think there's so many women right now who are thinking, I can't jump into this because I don't have a fully baked strategy. No, you don't necessarily need that. Just pick up the phone, get a couple of clients, test this out. You can do this while you're still in your day job. Like, there's so many ways to make the process work that is unique and true and authentic to that person's journey and that person's level of risk tolerance, if you will. So I think that's great advice.
Right. And can I chime in and just add like one or two
Yes,
more pieces of advice? Because
lay
this
it
is
on
something
us.
that I wish that I had known earlier. I think it probably would have saved me
Yeah.
a lot of time a year and a half ago. And it is one, make sure that you have really strong infrastructure and, systems in place. So even if it's just you, start now, start kind of outlining your system, your processes. It will save you a lot of time in the future. And the other thing is really just figuring out not who you're, maybe not necessarily the plan, the strategy, but who are those influences for you? Like, is it a mentor? Is it your PR team? Is it your market? Like, who is it that will have your back, that will support you? Like, find those people. I think that they were always there for me, but I didn't necessarily look at them in a strategic way. And I think there's just a lot of things that you already have that you might not know. But I wish that I had a better infrastructure when I started. That would have saved me a lot of time.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for sharing. And if people want to learn more about you, Kamber, or YoPro Know, where should they go?
So definitely encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn and connect with me. Maybe share a message of what you thought was interesting about this episode and what you enjoyed. You can go to our website at www.yoproknow.com. We've got a lot of free resources on there. We also have a podcast, so feel free to take a look at some of those free resources and just kind of learn more about us and sign up for our newsletter, which you can all do on our website. We send free weekly tips on recruiting and retaining talent.
Oh, I love that. This has been so much fun. And we will put all of the notes, all of the links and everything in the show notes so people can just click and come check you out and connect with you. But I'm so excited for you. Thank you for being here and sharing all of your wisdom with us. I know that our listeners today are going to get a lot out of this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Have a great day, everybody. Stay fabulous. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're inspired to take action by committing to one of the tips or strategies we talked about in today's episode. And if you want accountability and support, I've got your back. Join my private Facebook group, Successful Working Women Rocking Reinvention, today. You'll find a community of like-minded women waiting to support you, exclusive content, and helpful resources to ensure you succeed. Lastly, if you loved this episode, do me a favor and be sure to leave a review. Together, we can encourage more women to live their purpose. See you next time.